Hey there, Seahawks. It's Miss Adams, and in this video, we're going to learn about the binomial mean and standard deviation. All right, so our population parameters for binomial distribution are the mean and the standard deviation, and remember that the variance is the standard deviation squared. So we find that, and then we take the square root of the variance to get the standard deviation. All right, so the mean is found by n times p, where n is the number of trials and p is the probability of success. The variance, which is the standard deviation squared, is equal to n times p times q. And q is really 1 minus p, so you might see the formula as n times p times 1 minus p instead of q. Some textbooks and resources will use q, some will use 1 minus p. So I will kind of use a mix of both since I'm not sure on your exam at the end of the year which they'll use. So n, again, is the number of trials, p is the probability of success, q is the probability of failure. And then the standard deviation is just the square root of the variance, so it would be the square root of n times p times q. All right, finding the mean, variance, and standard deviation. So our steps, first we're going to identify a success and the values of n, p, and q. We're going to find the product of n and p to calculate the mean. We're going to find the product of n, p, and q to find the variance. We're going to find the square root of the variance to find the standard deviation, and then we'll interpret our results. So our problem is, in Seattle, Washington, 38% of the days in a year are rainy. Find the mean, variance, and standard deviation for the number of rainy days during the month of August. All right, so a success in this problem is considered a rainy day in August. Keep in mind that a success when we're doing problems like this are not always a good thing. Like, a success doesn't have to be something positive. Sometimes it's a negative, like has a negative meaning. All right. N, days in August, there are 31 days in August, so N is 31. The probability of success, they told me it was 38% of the time it's raining, which would mean the probability of failure would be 1 minus 0.38, which is 0.62, which is Q. So to find the mean, we're going to do N times P. So 31 times 0.38 gives me 11.78. So on average, there's 11.78 rainy days, so about 12 rainy days in August. The variance is N times P times Q, so 31 times the probability of success, 0.38, times the probability of failure, 0.62, gives me 7.3036. And the standard deviation would be the square root of n times p times q. We found n times p times q when we found the variance, so it's the square root of the variance, which works out to be 2.7025. And when we interpret this, we could say, on average, there are 11.78 rainy days in August. The number of days of rain typically varies by about 2.7 days from the mean. Okay, so the typically varies from the mean part, that's your standard deviation. The average is your mean. Now keep in mind that because you are finding a statistic, a mean and a standard deviation, those are statistics values that you've calculated, you are allowed to say values that don't necessarily make sense, like 11.78 days. So, go Seahawks.